for lifestyle, it's for business. While preparing for tomorrow, yes, we've seen only a few transactions. We don't know how the OTT is coming from the retail. It's a push from the wholesale. And lack of visibility on the speed of IP migration is always there. And it's there for three main reasons. Simplicity,
you feel
efficiency,
are the market trends that might define the center hub for the region?
Data centers, there's two words. The first one which has to come is an enterprise data center environment. And you have a lot of foreign companies and MNCs who are going to set up the operations, being it business or being it banking and finance. And they all need to get out of your server rooms and your office environment and really put equipment in proper design and build infrastructure, which has to have operators, and they all have to come together to make the connectivity.
All right, thank you. And would you like to add a little bit on that? Erin is the CEO of one of the co-location centers in Bangladesh. I think you're one of the pioneers in this space in Bangladesh. Would you like to add a little bit on that?
Exactly. As Andrew says, the power problem is the main problem we are facing because it's not reliable at all, but there is nothing. So like we have a data center which has everything like meeting rooms, a separate MMR.
Our view and Tata's view, and I hope I'll stimulate a little bit of thought in your minds about the challenge we have ahead of us, but more importantly what that challenge brings with it in terms of opportunities. Before I do that though, I'd like to change to one slide. Next slide please. You may wonder why I have a picture of a horse here. We need to go back and think about where our business model today has come from. If we go back to the 1800s and certainly the early 1900s, the way we transported payloads between carriers was by a horse. What we had was we had what we call a boundary rider. He'd hop on the horse, he'd load the saddlebags up with the mail, with our payload. He'd ride to an imaginary midpoint, hand those saddlebags over to the other boundary rider who would take it back to the city. Believe it or not, the business model hasn't changed. In all those years, we still do exactly the same now. We pick a submarine cable, we have matched cable capacity. We determine where that midpoint is. We carry our payload, whether it be voice minutes, whether it be a data packet. We hand it over to the other carrier at that midpoint. So here we are, 250 years later, still with the same business model. Now I've got to tell you, this changed, right? In 1876, the Alexander Graham Bell to migrate from prepaid card across to an IP platform, or even stay within the mobile environment but make it as a data call. And we've got to be ready for that if we're going to create a new revenue opportunity. The other thing, and I'll put it another way, if we look at that, imagine if you could, CityCell's receiving some inbound traffic currently through traditional carriers. Imagine if the person that's receiving that call with the CityCell on the CityCell service says to the person who's making that call, if you load the CityCell app on your mobile phone, you can make a call to me on the CityCell network at this rate. It's not free. I'm not so sure I ascribe to the Skype business model of giving it away for free.
We were so vertically integrated we thought bigger was always better. I think we've also I can focus on what I do best and I can rely on somebody else to do the other part. I know my outsourcing model, it's really now about a partnership and moving away from this method. The old gives us that. What it does do is if I choose my partner, what you do is you move the risk and time to market the investment
one to another network. That's where you fit in. And how do you look at it?
From a transport perspective or handing over traffic between different networks, I think the change from 2.3 to 3G is quite well covered in, on mobile side on the GRX world. But there's obviously with the LTE rollout in quite a few countries, there will be a different standard which is purely IP-based. And even now between the different, CWMA standards and so forth and GSM, there's already interconnectivity issues. So this move to a full IP world has become more and more complicated. And we can see that now. There's a lot of IP going around it.
Hopefully next year. So there we use ICX to handle our calls, because this is the BTRC plant, how local or international call will be handled through the ICX, and we will have all kind of IMS standard equipment or pure IP telephony services to deliver smartphone enable or soft phone or hard phone technology for our subscribers.
Okay. Now, whatever we are planning to do in IP or TDM, basically we are talking about internet, and the raw material of internet is IP bandwidth. In Learn Asia, we are right now doing a research that why Asia's IP wholesale bandwidth cost is 6 times higher than Europe, and how it is impacting. This is the slide. You can see from telegeography, and it's excluding the port charges and local access, local backhaul, everything. If you compare it with Hong Kong and Singapore, that is very high.